It gives me immense pleasure to be hosting today's talk by the Lahore Literary Festival with acclaimed writer and journalist Shabani Basu, who's joining us live from her home in London. Hello, Shabani.
Hi, so good to see you.
Yes, Shabani, we first met in 2014 when you were here in Lahore to attend the Lahore Literary Festival as a delegate from London. We struck up a conversation and have persisted in our friendship since then. Tell me something about the
Absolutely.
festival, how you felt coming to Lahore, the scale of the festival, the connectivity with so many people here.
Absolutely. It had always been a dream to go to Lahore because I was brought up in Delhi. So it was like, that connection was always so
Yes.
strong. And it took all those years, 2014, to come from London to go to Lahore. But anyway, thanks to you guys, I did it, and it was just fabulous. It was everything that I had ever dreamt of, and made so many friends. And here we are talking again. So, yeah, it was a fabulous
Absolutely.
festival.
And you were also a participant in the Lahore Literary Festival's London edition, which was, to bring South Asian culture and literature to another multicultural city like London. Tell me something about that.
Well, that was great too, just seeing all the old friends again. That was the best part. And of course, it was in a fabulous venue. It was at the British Library. And I think we had a fabulous discussion. I remember one of the sessions was on something similar, empire, and it was with Ramesh. It was really, really good. So, yeah.
So, Shabani, our talk today is very aptly titled Our History, Revising Empire Records. We're living through some very disturbing times in our history. With the pandemic, we've seen the South Asian community in the UK hit really badly, just like the African American community across the Atlantic has been disproportionately hit by the pandemic. And to
Mhm.
be followed on the heels with the racial tensions that have erupted in the aftermath of the George Floyd
Mhm.
murder.
Mhm.
Tell me, from your vantage point in London as a journalist, what do you see happening and where do you see all of this?
Been over a week of these protests now, and I think everything has just been bottled up and it's boiling over. That's what happened in the US. They were in lockdown, they were facing so much discrimination. Highest number of deaths were in the Black community, and then everything just came to a head. And the same sort of thing has happened here. I mean, this has been years and years of people, talking about these statues that have been offensive. And finally, they had to vent their anger. And I guess it started with Bristol, where, down you went. Edward Colston, a slave trader, uh, dragged down, thrown to the bottom of Bristol Harbor. And today,
And this
Churchill is
was a few
standing there.
and this was a few days back, the Bristol
This was last
statue.
Monday. So, yep, the statue was thrown, and then, the Churchill statue was vandalized in central London, in Parliament Square. And today, Churchill is standing boxed up. He is literally being protected from protesters and vandals. And that is the situation we are in. Statues are toppling. I think a lot of statues are symbols, but I think the conversation has started. I hope it goes in the right direction. I hope it doesn't get diverted because some rather silly things happen.
Yeah.
And I hope those don't happen. And I hope it stays focused and some good comes out of all this, really.
Absolutely. And a writer, historian, journalist like yourself, you have a knack for writing historical figures into history where they didn't exist. I mean, with The Spy Princess, the story of Nuremiah is an incredible story. It was merely a footnote in history, and you managed to excavate it from. So tell me something about that. That is an incredible journey we'd like to hear about.
Right. Well, I'd always been interested in the contribution of Indians in the war effort. So most people here don't know it was, it's studied as a very white war that was won by the Western countries for, to save the world and save the free world. But it was fought on the backs of the colonies. It was fought on, the backs of South Asians. The highest volunteer number was 2.5 million Indians. When I say Indians, I mean from the Indian subcontinent at that time. So I'd always been interested in them. And there was an article about the Indian contribution, and there was a tiny little photograph in one corner of the paper of a woman wearing a hat and smiling. And I said, oh, so, naturally, as a woman myself, I was drawn to that photograph. And there was only a tiny caption under it, and it said, Nuremiah Khan, a radio operator, Second World War, killed in Dachau. It was literally bullet points, awarded the George Cross. And I was like fascinated. Who was this woman? How did she reach the heart of the war in Europe? How did she get there? What was she doing? Why was she killed? Was she a Mata Hari type figure? I just wanted to know everything. And that's the start of the journey, really. It took about 3 to 4 years. And finally, I realized she was a Sufi. She was descended from Tipu Sultan. And the story just got more and more interesting. For those who don't know, who haven't heard of Noor Inayat Khan, I guess I should, tell our viewers.
Please do. Yes.
She was a secret agent in the Second World War. She was recruited by the British, sent into France, occupied France. She worked really bravely, the first woman radio operator to be sent there, worked France, but she was betrayed, captured, tortured, and executed.
And all at a very young age.
She was only 30 when she died. Because of her bravery, awarded the George Cross.
But tell me, Shabani, I mean, being able to write such a story, very empowered to be able to drag the story out from the footnotes and bring it up to the attention of the public. How did you feel when you were probably writing it? Were you even thinking, will this ever find an audience? Will you ever be able to publish this? Because, writing about man's job, and it's so entrenched in cliches. So tell me about that.
And also, the war, Second World War, is such a man thing. It's a very white, it's very male. So there was that bit as well. There was a little bit of, oh, who's this woman? Who's she going to write about the war? And of course, I'm a biographer. It's her personal story that I wanted. What took her there? What is the background? And then I traced her family. I traced her records, which had just been declassified. So that was a bit of luck. We all need a bit of luck. So the British government had declassified these files, and these contain all her training, how she's recruited, her messages from the fields. You get the goose pimples when you sort of sit there in the archives and you watch these files, and then you see these telegrams, and then you read the final telegram, missing in action. These files stamped with secret.
I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you.
Sitting in the archive, and you're like, my God, I'm going to start, you're just blubbering up, reading these telegrams. So that's the sort of high emotion it is. But when you write the story, you have to, you can't write a highly emotional story. You have to, and I guess my journalist training helps in that. You bring it down. You talk about her faults. I mean, everything is there. It's not a hagiography. I talk about her insecurities. I talk about the mistakes she makes. She's a human being. She's terrified. Who wouldn't be? And I think that's the story I managed to bring out.
Well, the most incredible bit about this is, of course, the book got published and was widely, it was hugely received. But what happened with the memorial going up in London? I would say it's a feather in your cap. Tell us how that happened, because we have pictures of you. A few with Princess Anne. I mean, to be able to bring out the royals, and that to, the royals to come and acknowledge what you've written and what you've shown to the world. Please tell us about that.
Well, if it had to be done, it had to be done well. There was no way I was going to have a tiny little ceremony with 5 people, right? So
you had to have Princess Anne there.
Absolutely, because she was also the head of, the reason I chose Princess Anne is because she was the head of Noor was part of an organization called the Fannies, which is the first aid nursing yeomanry, and Princess Anne is the chair of the Fannies. So, it all made sense. So we had her, and we had all the Fannies standing in uniform. I mean, someday you might be able to show these on your site. So it was like a ceremony which was a mix of Sufi, because we had her music, we had the Sufi music, as well as all the, the military ceremony. But the background to this was that it actually came from my readers. It wasn't my idea. So the moment the book was published, I got so much mail and such wonderful letters, which I've kept, from everywhere. And everybody said, thank you for telling us this story. Why didn't we know about her? And why isn't there a memorial for her? And all that had obviously never even struck me. So I sort of felt responsible, and I felt I have to carry this through. This is my responsibility now. I can't just write the book and walk away. Her brothers were there. I was very close to her brother by the time I'd written this book, and I promised him, I said, Noor will be a household name one day when this comes out. And I felt I had to carry on. And then I set up a committee. I've never done all this, fundraised, went about asking people for money. I probably had people running away from me because, oh my God, she's coming there again, going to ask for money. And
so who were your main supporters? Were they just your readers who just loved the story you told and wanted to make sure that Noor was immortalized?
Yeah. I got donations from £1 and £10 to 10,000. It was like across the board. And I went on BBC Women's Hour. By the time I came back from the studio, my inbox was full of people saying we want to donate. So it was a lot of, across the board, so many people. People from Europe also raised money and sent it to us. So we got the money, we had to get the permission, and then we had to get the royal. So then we got the royals.
How did that happen? Like you said, she's the chair of the committee, but to actually have her be there.
Yeah, well, I wrote to her. Over the course of this, I must have written 1,000 letters. So it was just a red letter saying, this is me, this is the statue, this is why she deserves it, will you unveil it? And we got a response, and then it was just working. It was actually quite straightforward after that. Sniffer dogs suddenly all around, all the security, everything. But it was a fabulous day. The statues there, Bloomsbury. Noor was somebody who believed in nonviolence. So the principles she stands for, she's not just a war hero with a gun out to shoot everybody. That wasn't Noor. Noor was fighting against fascism. Noor believed in the oneness of all religions. She was a Sufi. She believed in nonviolence. So her statue is actually a statue of peace and nonviolence. And people
That's
come
so
from
true when you
all
say
over.
that, because I have visited that memorial on one of your annual sort of memorial meetings, and it stands in Gordon Square, and it's surrounded by colleges and universities and young people cycling around, and the place itself has a peace which is truly Sufi. So I must give you all credit. You've really picked the best spot, and it's just a lovely spot to be able to get there every year and have a crowd there to remember Noor is wonderful.
Yeah, we even had some money left over from the thing, so we started a scholarship for students of Suaz. It's called the Nuremiah Khan Memorial Prize, so that the younger generation got involved. So we've given away 5 prizes. It's £1,000 that we give to a research document. So it's been good. We had an annual lecture. We had Arundhati Roy speaking. We've done well to keep it alive, going for the next generation, because
but I do remember you and I walking back and talking about and I remember you asking me, are there any Pakistani actresses that you know of who could maybe play Noor in a movie? Is that still sometime maybe it could happen?
I hope so. I have no idea. I mean, these things get optioned, and then the time runs out, then they get re-optioned. So I just step back, let the experts do it. So at the moment, it's with television. It's with the television producer. So the screenplay is being written. I think TV is the new way now. So things have moved from the feature film. I mean, I was lucky with Victoria and Abdul, of course. That became a major
So the other wonderful book that you wrote for King and Another Country, it's right here with me. I just love it. And that is also, again, another great read. And you're writing into history. Figures from South Asia who perhaps would not have been acknowledged before, or maybe have been, but not so much in such a public way. And there's really just such wonderful praise for you in this book. I'll just read from just one quote. It says, a beautifully written book that reminds us of the debt freedom owes to the Indian soldier and nation. So tell me about this book, because this led you to the first Muslim and the very first Indian recipient of the Victoria Cross, Khudadad Khan. So tell me about
That's
that.
right.
Another wonderful
That's right.
story, really.
Yeah, well, I wrote this book because the anniversary was coming, the centenary was coming up, and I knew there'd be so many books about the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun and, 100 other books all about the same thing. And nobody would remember these Indian soldiers. And 1.5 million of them came from India in the harshest of winters. They came in their cotton khakis and they fought in these trenches, cold. Um, in a language they didn't understand, in weather they'd never, in freezing cold winters. And I just wondered, what did they feel? How did they do it? And of course, they also went on to win these Gallantry Awards. October is Khudadat Khan. It is the first. He's in Belgium. He's defending this trench till the last. Everyone's fallen, and he's standing there, and he keeps firing till the last bullet is gone. And he was awarded the first Victoria Cross. Nobody had heard of him, really. I mean, maybe some military experts know, but not generally. So I felt, all these stories have been written. There were two Garhwalis. These are men from the villages in Garhwal in India, who are just basically they're farmers who join up and then they become soldiers. They're illiterate. And and he won the Victoria Cross. One died. Khudadat Khan survived, so he was, one of the lucky ones. There was another Pakistani as well. I mean, of course, they were all Indians then, but Mir Dast, he was also a Pathan. He got it. But he suffered because he inhaled the poison gas, and he saved many people. He survived for a few months, but he wrote this beautiful letter which says, "Ye dhuan, mujhe abhi bhi," it's still torturing me, this dhuan, when he's still recovering. So there was Mir Dast as well. There were these two Garhwalis. They won 11 Victoria Crosses, which you can't believe, and so many medals of, Then there was this other story, which was also, for me, I'm not a military historian, I look for the human stories. There was one story about who wasn't a soldier at all. Because when the Indians went there, it's Hindus and Muslims, Gurkhas, and now the Hindus aren't going to eat beef, the Muslims aren't going to eat pork. So they had an army of cooks and cleaners, and people would just travel with them, this army, traveling with the soldiers, just to feed and clean and give water. And so a cleaner, he was, in India, he was just, he's what they were called untouchables at that time. And he doesn't even have a full name. His name is just Sukha. And I found his story in the file, where they don't know what to do about Sukha because Sukha is dead. And I was just so intrigued. And I said, what, this after 2 weeks reading hospital reports, of x-rays, and then suddenly Sukha. And then I sort of probed into it. And what had happened is Sukha had come. He was a cleaner. He cleaned the trenches, cleaned the ships, he cleaned the hospitals. He moved to England. Now he's cleaning the hospitals where the Indians were. And then he has pneumonia. He dies. So by 2015, he's dead. But then the tragedy starts. He is then taken to Brighton. So he goes to Brighton. They take him to Brighton and they say, cremate him to the Hindus. And the Hindus say, he's an untouchable. We're not going to cremate him. And then they take him to the Muslims. They go to Woking Mosque, and where the Muslims were being buried. And for the Muslims, the Imam of that mosque says, he's not a Muslim. We are not going to bury him. And Sukha is lying in no man's land, created by his own countrymen, divided religions. And to me, the story was so tragic till there's a happy ending. So the local clergyman, the local vicar of Brockenhurst Church, he comes up and he says, Sukha died for us, so we will bury Sukha. So Sukha is buried in this church. It's a very beautiful church. And he's lying there. And the parishioners, they all collected money. And, he has the biggest headstone in the village. So it's actually really nice. And now Sukha's story has gone around the whole world. And people go and they actually visit his grave and send me photos from there. So, this man, who we don't even know what he looked like, has found a place in history. So for me, that was very special. So I wanted to share this story with you.
That's a wonderful story. And the fact that now you will never be able to look at the history of the wars and just not have the South Asian factor. It will not be an invisible factor. It will be a factor which is there, which has to be acknowledged. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
tell
I
me that,
think so.
since we're talking about revising empire records, and so much of revision is happening on the roads these days, in the protests, in the Black Lives Matter protests, how do you think revision can be forced, or is revision or rewriting of history a gradual process that should only be undertaken by people like yourself, people who are trained to sort of look at things in a light which is away from passionate protest? How do you see
Mhm.
all of this panning out?
I think the more, well, people like us, we can try, and there are more, there are younger people now who need to take this on. I want the next
Mm,
generation to start this as well.
yeah.
Academics have done it in their own way. People like us who write these narrative nonfiction, mine is still nonfiction, but it is narrative. It's something that's not an academic book. It's something which is footnoted and almost like an academic book, but it's approachable, so people can pick it up and read it. Um, we can tell these stories, and the thing is, these stories, if we don't tell our stories, nobody else will.
True.
When I started writing Victoria and Abdul, I'll come to that. When I first started the research, I read all the biographies of Victoria, and Abdul was mentioned in them because he was an important person. And he was always painted as a rogue. And that is because, somebody who'd used the queen, manipulated the queen. And that's what I thought when I started. And I said, that's fine, I'll write about him. But that is because, as I researched it, I just find it's because it's been written by the Western historians who've only consulted one side of the story. They have their sources from the household, who are all racist, who all hate him. And they put this, they paint this picture of Abdul, which is,
Mm.
not a very nice one. And so I saw it from the other side. I saw his side of the story. I saw what Victoria thought of him. And
Tell us about the
that's
diaries that you discovered. Was it at Windsor Castle? Diaries written by the Queen in her own writing in Urdu, and nobody could read Urdu, so they were just lying there till you picked them up.
Yes, exactly. So this is what I mean. So, well, to tell our viewers about who haven't heard of Abdul, Abdul was a servant who had come to Queen Victoria's court for her Golden Jubilee, and quickly rose from being a servant to being one of her favorites. So I, wanted to write his story, and I started. I said, you've got to start at the top. So I wrote to Windsor Castle and their archives, and I said, I want to read Victoria's journals, and I want to read the Hindustani journals, because Abdul, I knew, had taught her Urdu. And nobody knew that Queen Victoria, actually could read and write in Urdu. That was something completely new to, most of the people. So I went there. They allowed me to see the archives. I thought it would be a little diary with a few phrase, like a phrase book, idhar aao, udhar jao sort of thing. Oh my goodness, it was a trolley full. 17 volumes were there. And I had to
Wow.
go through all of them, and they were just amazing because you could see Queen Victoria's handwriting, and he's teaching her. And the little things they talk about, like, I'm going to Abdul's house for tea, I'm going to meet Mrs. Karim for tea, or Abdul's cat has had kittens and I'm going to see the kittens. This is the Empress of India.
And she's writing it
She's
all in
she's
Urdu.
yeah, she's going to go to Abdul's house and see these, the cat has had kittens. It just shows the personal relationship between these two. And I explored that further. I went to Agra, I found his grave, I then traced his family, and then one thing led to the other, and they told me that Karim's diary, the family diary. And that was like, oh my God, cherry on the cake. Next flight, visa done. I was in Karachi. I stayed with the family and I held that diary. And my goodness, this is his
Wow.
voice, everything. And so the whole story really came together and it was amazing. I could just, show how racist they were. And they
Mm.
used to call him, they used to say, he's repulsive. I shudder every time he walks by. they used to call them the Black Brigade. All the Indians were called the Black Brigade. So, it's just full of all the racism. So that story was written from their side. I had to balance it and show the real side. So that's what I mean when, rewriting these records. We have to bring our own history. So this was looking at this empire, Queen Victoria's court, from, the bottom up, from the level of this clerk in Agra jail, a commoner with just nothing really, 24-year-old. And he became such an important man.
And they tried very hard to kind of obliterate all trace of him. And yet something like this. Tell me, how was the book received by your friends, the royals, who were supporting you? I mean, did you get any kind of any feedback from anywhere? Tell us.
Well, not from the royal family. They don't exactly write to you. But I do know that once the film came out, Kamila was very curious, and she went with Judi Dench to Isle of Wight, to Osborne House. She took her there, and she was very, very interested in the history. So she went and stayed there. And the other interesting thing was Queen Victoria had given Abdul Karim Frogmore Cottage. She gave him houses everywhere. She even named a cottage after him, built a cottage for him and called it Karim Cottage in Scotland. But in Windsor, she'd given him Frogmore Cottage, Frogmore House. And very interestingly, Harry and Meghan were given, when they wanted to move, they went to Frogmore Cottage. And I was contacted by all the journalists, like, oh my God, this is where Karim lived. And then I had to point out, I said, that was given to him by Victoria. Meghan, the Queen, gave it to her. But then I had to point out that there was a dark side to that, because after Queen Victoria died, the establishment came down heavily on Karim, and they burned all the letters on the orders of the king. They burnt all the letters that she had ever written to him. And these were burnt outside Frogmore House. And I said, but there's a dark history to Frogmore House. And now Meghan and Harry have gone. The only black royal in that family has been forced out.
Do you think there was a connection with Meghan getting that cottage?
I don't know. I just got a funny feeling when they went to Frogmore. I said, why did they choose Frogmore? And it has a dark history in many ways. And it was a coincidence, but also it was sad that, she was supposed to leave, really. So that's it. It's still such a long way to go as far as race goes in this country.
Absolutely. And so much of history still needs to be looked at again and revisited. What's next on for you? I mean, is there something that you can share with us? I know you're working on something.
I am. I'm trying to write in this, crazy world that we are living in, all under lockdown. It's actually harder to write under lockdown. I'm so used to going out and being inspired by everything else around me. But yes, I'm trying to finish my book, and hopefully it'll be out next year. I can't yet talk about it, but it's not about the wars. And but it is historical again. It's a bit of fun and a bit of everything combined. Let's see. I hope everybody likes it.
Yes, and I hope it's not a forced revision, but a well thought out revision, because these days all we're seeing is just forced revision, which is fine, because sometimes you need to let the steam out, but it has to be a well thought out, proper revision or revisiting of history.
Is so important because statues, as this whole thing has now become about statues. Statues are so important. They are symbolic. That's it. But just bringing down a statue is not going to change the history. And it's so important that history is taught. I mean, I've been talking about this for years now, that it should be in the curriculums. We should be taught the history of empire. We should know the history of colonialism. We should know what happened. Jallianwala Bagh, we need to know that soldiers came here in the First World War, that 5 months after they gave their lives, what did they get? They got Jallianwala Bagh, basically less than 6 months after the end of the war. They are killed. Unarmed people are killed instead of being rewarded. So that is the sort of bloody history that has happened with colonialism. And we need to know those. We need to know Edward Colston, who was pulled down in Bristol. We need to know where, what happened in the slavery world, how many came. People now, people hadn't even heard of Edward Colston. Now they know,
Yeah.
and now they'll study it. So, that at least has been important. Another statue was actually removed by Tower Hamlets Council. And what was really interesting was that immediately as this happened, the next day, the mayor of London, Sajid Khan, he said that there should be a revision, and he immediately set up a commission to look at all the memorials, the roads, and connected with slavery, and take a decision on them. So that was immediate reaction, and I think that's brilliant. So let's hope it moves forward in a positive way, because often these things deteriorate, and it shouldn't be, something positive should come out of it.
Yeah, it should not be a reactionary movement, but a movement which is well thought out. Like I said, any revision, any rewriting of history should be done with a proper. But tell me something. Sadiq Khan is doing this with London. Do you think it's going to be happening all over the UK, or is it just with somebody like him, who is supposed to be very broad-minded?
Well, he is. I mean, he's thinking ahead, and of course he belongs to, he's an Asian, and he's proud of his Muslim and his Asian heritage. So let's have this conversation. Let something start. And also, a lot of museums are looking at it. And that conversation has been happening for a while. It's just that now it's come out in the, really in the public fore. I know Museum of London were bringing up their new museum. I mean, I'm one of the consultants for looking at their Asian London story, making sure that the migrant story is told. Commonwealth War Graves Commission are looking at memorializations, and how
of which
many
you
are not
remember.
overlooked.
You remember
Well,
of
of
that
which
committee.
I'm a consultant again on this committee. So yes, I mean, and this has been in the works. This is not overnight. This has been in the works for some time. So there has been awareness, but a lot more has to be done. Unwritten. And then what is to be done with these statues? Where are they going to be put? How many museums are you going to fill with slave traders? Where will they go? Will they be in Delhi? We have this Coronation Park, which is full of all the statues of all the British royals who were all taken down. So they all sit in this park now. Will these statues all sit in museums? Will there be a park for them? Who knows? So all this we'll see as it goes on. But just the statues is not the answer. It has to be in the education system. It has to be in the curriculum. And that is the only way out. People need to know what happened. People need to, when they say Churchill divides opinions, yes. So because people don't know what happened, what his opinions on India, how he, seen as responsible for the Bengal famine. People need to, what he said about Indians. So let all this come out, and let it be part of the education process, and that is the real history that hopefully will go forward.
Absolutely. And with all of this coming out, and with things being written back into history that had been perhaps written out of history, perhaps that would be the best way to heal the wounds that we are all sort of looking at and suffering from at this time. So Shrabani, with that, we're out of time. It was such a wonderful session, and thank you so much for joining us and telling us about this wonderful work that you've done, and this history that you have rewritten, and written with an eye for South Asians who were very much part of everything, but somehow were invisible till you wrote them in your books. Thank you so much. Thank you all of us for joining us, Shrabani. Stay safe and stay healthy. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.